This is Jesse Hensley.
And this is Josh Turner.
Welcome to Turn Down for What?
Welcome back to Turn Down for What, where we discuss all things EV.
Good, bad, and the ugly.
The good, bad,
Speaking
and
of
the
ugly, how are you doing today, Josh? Are you doing okay?
I'm doing good.
Yay.
All right. Start us off for the news, Ford.
Okay, so they are doing a pause on their EV plant in Michigan. This is a $3.5 billion plant, and they are putting it on hold right now as they reevaluate what's going on for the cost and the labor disputes and everything else going on. So
Is that part of the strike?
I don't think it is. From other news articles I've read this morning, it's trying to be seen as, from their side, this would be the workers' side, as punishment for it. I think it's, I don't think that's the case. I don't know, obviously, but that's how they feel. I think that you're getting a lot of pressure because of who they are partnering with, which is a Chinese firm, so there could be some questions there. Again, you're being told you have to do EVs by a certain time, and yet here's all the pitfalls that happen when you try to do what different groups are trying to go with.
Do we have any insight on the status of the strike?
I don't think it's going to have anything. They're not budging right now.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to budge. You have one group wanting to do working 3 days a week or 4 days a week instead of 5 and getting a 40% pay raise. That's a big gap to fill. We don't have we don't have a lot of unions in our area. I have worked with unions. I got mixed emotions on both sides. So
I mean, because they're dealing with the writer strike in Hollywood. They've been doing that for months now.
And that's over.
Is it over now? I know it was coming close.
Yeah, the writer strike is over, but now you have the actor strike. So that is going up against AI technology. And I think what we're looking at is the same thing. So they're worried, and this would be the writers and the actors. Hey, you can have AI now create mine, and if you own my ability to do that, then I could be in a movie and not get paid for it because you own my.
Just for the sake of it, I mean, because we're talking about AI, I went on there because of the sophistication of the like Chat GPT and things like that. This is a total side tangent, but with that being in place, you could go in there and say, write an episode of this show, this context, and make this happen, and it writes a full script.
So you have that side of it, which ruins their ability to make a living.
Yeah.
And could potentially work out to where they're doing it better than what they can.
Yeah.
And I think what the auto workers are looking at is, hey, you're about to make a car that has a lot less moving parts. Most of it's going to be automated in the construction. So where does that fit us? How are we going to make our money if you're moving everything away from what we're making our money on? Yeah. And, I'm not intelligent enough in this field to be able to say one side is right and one side is wrong. I have my own feelings of, hey, is $180,000 a year for that job worth it? And that's what you kind of go off of. But again, I don't live in those areas.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it is worth it or not in those areas. So there's a lot of things on this, and I really don't like towing the line. I have my opinions that usually put me in one place or the other, but on this one, I can see it from both sides. Now, that's on the workers' side for UAW and that side. And they have a lot of legitimate reasons to want to have a contract negotiated to help them, because I do see the ability to have a lot of profits. And if you're making a lot of profit, it should be shared.
And it's always been the balance as manufacturing has evolved.
Yeah.
The automation eliminates jobs, but for a company, it's more consistent.
Yeah. And see, the companies are being pushed into this. The companies are being pushed into this. So does that mean that it's not necessarily the company's fault? It's that they're getting a vehicle that has less moving parts. It's the mechanism that's putting them there for the environmental aspects. I don't know. On this one, I'm going to kind of plead the fifth on both sides. I hope they get I hope both sides get what they want, because if neither one of them are happy, that means it was a good deal. Yeah. So now on the writer's strike, I don't agree. I think what's going to happen is they're going to say, look, you can't use any of this technology to make a movie. And it's going to get to the point within a few years that somebody in their basement's going to click a button and say, I got an idea. They're going to write up something. Boom. Now they got a movie that's all AI. They're going to put it out there on Rumble or one of these channels, and they can get the benefit of having something they made from scratch from actors that are not real actors, that don't look like nobody. Before Thor, how many movies was that character in? That actor. So can you create an actor out of nowhere with a good storyline and then have AI help you? I don't care where it comes from. If it's entertaining, I'm going to watch it. Yeah. So I think that's going to be, and again, they haven't released what the conditions are, but I think it's going to open the door for people who want to make their own movies and everything if they want to use AI for it. And AI obviously is going to get into EVs, because what if I can take a tractor trailer and drive an EV tractor trailer with nobody in it? And now I'm taking truck drivers' jobs, and that is a concern. I think California is passing some laws that say you have to have people inside of a vehicle for that. So you still have to pay that labor source. But it is a real concern when you look at how quick AI has developed in the last, say, 5 years. Yeah. What's the next 5 years going to be?
I've seen taxis that will drive themselves.
Yeah, I'm watching the Sarah Connor Chronicles just to catch up on when Judgment Day happens and they take over. So hey, way to go Skynet, we're friends. So anyway, so that is happening with Ford. At the same time, Samsung in Michigan has announced plans to double their plant's manufacturing capacity.
Is that just a middle finger to Ford?
Well, here's the difference though. The reason I wanted to mention that is they just made that announcement with 368 new people and new workers, and they have an expected pay of $37.50. Now, I erased high-paying jobs at $37.50 an hour because that's what it said. Yeah. But yet, I think that the amount that's being asked on the other side, say Ford, is like $160 or $150. I don't know the number, but I know it's up there. So at the same time, Ford is pausing the one in Michigan. You have Samsung expanding theirs and offering $37.50 an hour, which I don't think would even come close to what the UAW would ask for. So I'll just put that in there because the announcements happened this week as well, and it's kind of ironic that is a good contrast to show what that company is doing and why they can afford to make EV batteries, and maybe it's not the others. So again, I hope everybody works out what the differences are there. I know it's going to be big for the national economy. If that sector slows down, it's going to hurt everybody. So, let's hope they both can get in a room and come up with a solution that is good for everybody. But it's also a $41 million facility. 100,000 square foot facility being built in Hopkins, Kentucky. Yeah, is it Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Now, that is just over the line of Tennessee. So this is going to be a recycling center, and it's going to be for EV batteries. It is a South Korean company, SK Eco Plant, and they are going to partner with Ascend Elements, and this is going to be a recycling plant just north of the border. I think it's like within 20 miles of Tennessee. So now you're starting to see some of these support facilities for the questions that were being asked. Well, what's going to happen to these batteries? What's going to happen to these cars? Are they going to sit in landfills? Are they going to hurt the environment?
And we saw something about the recycling of batteries where they're able to get most of the rare earth materials.
Oh yeah, you can get it all out now. And people say, oh, it explodes. No, they got a system that it immerses it in water as it shreds. I've watched the process. It's a very cool process. So on that part of it, I think we're making progress from a standpoint of how do you create a solution to the problems that EVs cause? Yeah. And one of them is the life expectancy and the afterlife of that vehicle. What are you going to do with it? Here's one of the solutions. Same thing is, what is the solution for range anxiety? We're trying to provide that solution as well. Level 2s are providing that solution. So one of our partners, Linkwell, is providing those solutions with their systems as well. So I really do think that as we keep going in this industry, you are going to get those solutions, especially since you have the incentives. I don't know if you could get those solutions after the incentives. Yeah. Will this thing stand on its own property? Well,
adoption will increase the use case. Yeah. I mean, with the current amount of EVs on the road, as we've discussed in charging infrastructure, it's a lot harder to make it profitable. But when 50% of the cars on the road are EVs, then charging stations make more sense. When you can generate energy and have energy for cheaper, then charging stations make more sense. And the same goes for EV battery manufacturing, new EV battery plants. If there's a larger use case and high demand, then you can obviously lower your cost. And so that's something that, as they're having to put all this investment in on a federal end, because they are trying to push the adoption. But once the adoption comes, hopefully the return of investment will
and again, for us, you know, we are both ICE people before we got the vehicles we have now. I don't think I could go back to a gas vehicle.
I do really enjoy the EV.
I don't think I could go back to it. And that is kind of that is the key to it. If I feel that way about it, how many other people, once they make that transition, would feel that way? So that's kind of a question there. And really, when it comes to these factors that do recycling, I mean, we're talking a lot of material. We're talking at 24,000 metric tons of EV battery material, and that's about 56,000 batteries. So 56,000 destroyed cars, for example, and all of those rare earth metals are coming out of it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm going to skip this to go to one I talked that I looked at this morning. Prices are tumbling for cobalt because of the amount of new cobalt that is out there. So unfortunately, you know, this isn't because we are coming up with new solutions and new batteries that don't use that cobalt yet, but it is, you know, just say from the high, which for all of you that don't know the value of cobalt. So if I had a big block of iron or something like that, you're probably looking, you know, I can remember $1 a pound back, or a penny a pound back in the day. But if you have a ton sitting there, you're probably looking at $100, a couple $100 per ton. For cobalt, you're looking last month or a month and a half ago, you're looking at $60,000 per ton of cobalt. And this past month, it went down to $32,000
so
per ton.
50% drop.
Yeah,
in the
46,
cost, yeah.
I think is what it was. So, and that is because you're having Indonesia and some of these other companies support the Congo. And again, the way it's being mined is very polluting. You know, you have to consider how it's being extracted and things like that. There are solutions that you can get into, which is a cheaper lithium iron phosphate battery. And you also have it from nickel and cobalt, magnesium. I think those are NCMs respectively for those batteries. But again, it's do you go to nickel or do you stay with cobalt? And see, even in Indonesia, the process to create or to get the nickel gives you your cobalt. So it's actually a byproduct back then. And now that it's being utilized in these batteries, it is something that is definitely going to be more valuable. Is that a good thing or bad thing? I don't know. You know, right now it looks like 2027 is our time period of when cobalt won't come close to the battery needs of, you know, the global network.
But hopefully by then we're going to be looking at some of the newer tech like solid state and things that will require less rare earth metals.
And that kind of gets into another meeting or another article about Toyota. So Toyota has released their EV roadmap, and they've identified 4 types of batteries. And some of them we
touched on this.
We did a little bit. Yeah. So with that, they have their lithium ion battery. They are going to introduce it in 2026. That's going to be for your it says performance, but that is what we're using right now for our trucks.
Yeah, just a standard.
Yep. Then you have a lithium iron phosphate. That's going to also be for batteries. Now, that's going to be for, I think, your cheaper cars, your non-performance, lower horsepower, but still longer lasting, because lithium iron can be a very good battery once you get the technology into it and you do the refinement the proper ways. So they have that one coming in. And then you have the bipolar structure with the lithium ion chemistry. That's going to be for your high performance and high range that they're going to be building. And then you have the solid state, which is commercial uses and other systems that they have. I'm sure they'll have a very high-end car that could use that. And then the solid state is between 2027, 2028. Now, obviously, this is just speculation. I would believe it when I see it type of a thing, but it does show that some of the biggest car makers now are really heavily considering this and putting an effort in trying to develop their systems. And we've been kind of talking about how Toyota's been quiet in this game. for a little while, but they've made the best plug-in hybrid, I guess, or the best hybrid that's out there. Everybody, when the Prius came out, it was a game changer from how much your range was.
And there's very few vehicles on the road that can compete when it comes to a Toyota range.
Yes.
Toyota efficiency when it comes to their hybrid systems that they developed.
Except for the truck.
Yeah.
So that's what they have going on right now. Again, batteries. It's good to have the batteries in there and have that technology coming in. And with the price of cobalt going down, that may be helpful in that aspect to possibly I don't think it'll be as easy to replace once that price goes down. The higher the price, I think it'll make it easier to replace because then there's cheaper options out there. But if it all comes down to supply and demand in this case. So if we could come up with a solution that doesn't demand that cobalt, it'll be better for the EV sector
absolutely
as a whole. And then lastly,
it's good that costs are down now, but it's a means to an end, and we have to have a solution.
Yeah, so we'll hit up. We're gonna have a small vehicle spotlight today. Real quick, you did have Elon talk about the X on his platform X about the performance of the Cybertruck and the performance version, and apparently he says it's going to be really, really good. So we'll see what that means. The next generation top speed. So love to see what that's going to look like.
A truck that goes 2 seconds and 0-60.
Performance, it probably could.
Yeah.
I mean, it really could. So,
and for it to rival the Plaid to be a big old truck, that would be pretty interesting.
That would be impressive if you could take that car or that
even under 3 would be impressive for a truck that size.
Yeah, because ours is little under 4, I think.
It's at 4, yeah.
So anyway, and for our spotlight today, before we get to our special guest, Fisker builds their 5,000th Ocean. Now, we've not talked about the Fisker Ocean. So Fisker is a car company. I think they went out of business on their Karma. Really cool car back in the day, early on in the EV sector. And now they have their Ocean, and they're looking to target about 3,000 deliveries per day in the fourth quarter. And that's actually pretty good numbers. That's probably up there with the F-150 Lightning when it comes to what they're producing.
Yeah.
68,000, a little high for what it is, 69 euros, 1,000 euros. So you're looking at a 113 kilowatt battery. So very similar. Our trucks have a little bit more. 468 horsepower. That's about right. Dual motor, all-wheel drive powertrain. 360 mile range, though. And then the 440 range on the 20-inch tires and rims. Now, that's the impressive part here. You're getting 440-mile range out of that car. That is a SUV. I guess that would make it a crossover the way it looks. And, that
for competition, the Rivian is only mid-300s, the R1S. And so that is leading the industry when it comes to range on an SUV style vehicle.
And obviously they have a lot of different ranges and trims and everything. So if you get the cheapest, lowest mileage, that's 250 mile Ocean Sport, and it starts at $37,499. So that puts you very smartly at $29,999 for that vehicle after the $7,500 rebate. So $30,000 car. Again, we were talking about that the other day. Where can you find a $30,000 EV? Right there is one.
And I mean, for the Ocean Ultra, you get 350 mile range for 50.
Yeah. So 40
with the discount, you're 42.5.
So
yeah, I mean that's more affordable. That's more affordable than the average vehicle.
And that's a vehicle I would try. I would try that one.
It looks pretty cool. Yeah. And the Fiskers look cool.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think the more you make, the cheaper it is. And that's how it should be. And in this case, Fisker has come out with something that I don't think anybody would have thought they would have been able to produce in the time frame they did. I don't know if they're using the Fisker factory and how much of the old group is in with this one. I didn't do a lot of research on them only because we've not talked about that car company, but it's a good car for what it is in the market. Now, is it a good car? I don't know. I don't know anybody that has one. I've not looked at any of the reports. They just got 5,000 of them out.
I spoke to 2 people who have it on reservation, but they did not have their physical vehicle in yet.
Yeah, but at 300 per day, it won't take long for them to get that. I mean, that's 1,500 production vehicles a week. that's getting up there. That is probably higher than what the F-150 Lightning is. So,
but it is also, I mean, it's a lot smaller. I think it's more along the lines of an Escape
or an
than
Edge.
It is. Yeah. The smaller version of an SUV compared to, the
all about usability. F-150s, you can use them for anything. So, and you have a lot of room. But, gives you an option out there for a vehicle that I guess the closest competition would be the Y.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, and I have a friend of mine who will be getting a Y soon. Just got rear-ended in their Tesla. So the next one they're getting is a Y. She was showing me where she got hit at it. She was going, person that hit her was going 45 mile an hour and hit her to stop. And she got to drive away, and it doesn't look like it did anything.
That's crazy.
Totaled the other girl's car. So, so good build quality, and we've heard that from a lot of people. And the funny part about when I was researching some of these, I had one article right above it said, "Oh, the build quality of the new Cybertruck is horrible," and it had a picture on it. And then the next article down said, "Oh, the best build quality in the world now." It had the same picture showing from the aerial. So there's a lot of back and forth on people that don't want that to be a success and people that do want it to be a success.
The ultimate test will be when we get yours in and we can take it around and beat it up a little bit and see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, because Josh loves it when I don't wash my vehicles and, I drive them and I don't clean the interior. We cannot take my truck anywhere because he's like, it's too dirty on the inside. I'm like, well, just work, but, don't want to hear it. So anyway, we're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, we'll have our guest of this week. And we'll go from there.
All right. We are back. We have Dr. Doug. Are you on the line?
Yeah.
So how are you doing today, sir?
Good, thank you. Everything's great here.
Awesome. So you are based out of Canada. What part of Canada are you in?
I'm right near Niagara Falls. I'm literally 10 minutes across the border, and I'm in Niagara Falls, New York. So
very cool.
It's like living right on the border.
I actually have family that lives in upstate New York, about an hour from there. But yeah, so you currently drive two different EVs. You have a Leaf, I think it was a couple years old, and then you drive the Kona EV. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the Leaf is a 2017. Mileage, it would be about 80,000 miles.
Wow. Okay.
The other vehicle's a Kona, a 2021 Kona, and it's got almost 50,000 miles.
Wow,
so yeah, I've put on a lot of miles. So I've driven from where I am in Niagara all the way up into northern Ontario, northern Canada. I've also driven to Terre Haute, Indiana, from here, which was a little bit of a test going that far, and going down through Detroit, down through Toledo, Ohio, and across Fort Wayne, and then down into Terre Haute with my 2021 Kona.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, that's made by Hyundai. But so, I mean, what is the range on that?
The range in miles, it's around 260. It's around brand new. You're getting about 420 kilometers. So that's approximately 260 miles. Excellent range. We're talking that's in, spring to fall.
Yeah.
Winter, it's going to be a little bit less than that, but most of the year you're talking in around that 400 plus kilometers at 100% battery capacity.
Very cool. Very cool. So, yeah, I mean, obviously having driven, I mean, one of the curiosities that, I don't have experience in is the charging infrastructure throughout Canada. So taking it through Canada up to northern Canada, what is that experience like with charging infrastructure where you're at?
Excellent. I had no issues. I just did it actually in August. I've done it a few times. I went to a place called Manitoulin Island, which is about 7 to 8 hours from here. And that's almost due north. So it's quite far. It's semi-isolated. I had no issues. I went from here to a place called Parry Sound, which has, I think, around 4 level 3 chargers. I think it's 4 level 3 chargers. So even if you have a couple down, you have a redundant type of setup.
Yeah.
Then I went up to a place called Sudbury, which is actually, that's where they're going to be having a lot of the minerals and things, like they mine copper. They're starting to mine cobalt there. So these are all going to work into the batteries eventually. They have a number of charging stations up there. From there, I went over to a place called Espanola, which is just a little tiny community. I don't even know if there's 1,000 people there. They have high-speed chargers there. And from there, I mean, that was it. I was pretty much there. Now, in Canada, across Canada, they have a Trans-Canada Highway. And apparently you can go from one end of Canada to the other using the Trans-Canada chargers. In other words, they're set up in a way that you could go entirely across Canada. I wouldn't do it in my Leaf, but if you did it with a Kona or with a Tesla long range Model Y, something like a Kia Niro, any of those 2020 and above, I don't think you'd have any problems going across Canada doing that. Going down into the U.S., one of my original papers actually was taking the Nissan Leaf from a city called Hamilton, which is about 500,000 people, and going from Hamilton to Erie, Pennsylvania. So going down I-90 right into Pennsylvania there. And in 2019, the infrastructure just was not there. It was a real big effort to get there. I had to stop multiple places. No fast charging at all along that route back in 2019. Now I've updated one of my papers. It's great now. Fantastic. I've done it multiple times to Erie now through the NEVI program or NEVI program. There is so much more infrastructure built between Buffalo and Erie, Pennsylvania. Anybody with a Leaf, even an older Leaf with a 30 kilowatt battery can go, you can drive for hour and 15 minutes, stop, get a quick charge, go to the next place. You only have to do it, 2 times with the fast chargers and you're there. So it's the infrastructure is so much better. I've repeated the drive in both 2022 and 2023 with the Nissan Leaf and with the battery degradation, which is heavy in degradation at this point, and there was still no issues. But back in early 2019, I could not do it. I literally had to stop for an hour and 20 minutes on a level 2 charger, which is, just a regular plug-in charger.
Yeah.
And it barely got me enough to get there. And, the next time in 2022 going there, it was very easy. There's multiple fast chargers along the way. There's redundancy. So if one's down, you can go another, 30 miles, hit another charger, zoom right into Erie, Pennsylvania. Erie, Pennsylvania has the Electrify America right near the Walmart. And I think there's got to be 6 fast chargers, maybe 8 fast chargers there. So lots of infrastructure. Those were not built. Those were being built back in 2019, but they were not available in 2019. So Erie in 2019 had 0 level 3 chargers.
Yeah, it seems like, you are what is a true early adopter.
Yeah.
A lot of the people that started buying EVs and when they first came out, 2012, 2013, I mean, they had to deal with the true difficulty of infrastructure. We are all still early adopters. I mean, Jessie and I both have the F-150 Lightning trucks.
Yeah, but that's a big difference between
our adoption in the last 3 years is drastically different than owning an EV 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the infrastructure improvements that have happened in the last 5 years have made the EV driving experience possible, but the infrastructure improvements coming in the next 5 years are going to make it thrive. And so we were speaking to the New York Department of Transportation, and they've barely scratched the surface of what they're hoping to do with infrastructure. And so, I definitely agree with you that in 19, the landscape looks totally different than it does today. But you give it 3 more years, and especially in places like New York, we're going to see infrastructure every 10 to 20 miles, almost like gas stations compared to the current EV experience, which we've had, which in our Southeast United States region can be 100 to 200 miles apart for charging stations. It's doable. I mean, my truck range is 300, 270. It's 320 advertised, but 270 on the highways. If the charging station's 150 miles apart, you just have to plan, but it's not like you can skip one and go 10 miles and find the next one. And so by having the infrastructure improvements across the United States with the NEVI, it's not going to be more than 50 miles, period, across the whole nation, every interstate, every approved corridor, 50 miles. Well, that's a gigantic improvement to the driving experience as a whole. But it's good to hear that Canada obviously has some infrastructure already in place. And it's interesting because Canada has so much more of those rural areas where, it's curious to see how that infrastructure improves. Because like you said, you don't necessarily want to take a vehicle across Canada, but that's where infrastructure in rural areas of Canada and United States and things, that's what the improvements there, like the Midwest of the United States, you can't really easily drive from here to California. Infrastructure in Eastern America and Western America are great, but Middle America, you really struggle. And so these funding improvements make it to where you can drive across the United States and actually hit those charging stops and have a reliable, redundant experience like you're talking about with at least 4 chargers on each site. So
for sure. Yeah. So about your Midwest. Yeah. So going down to Terre Haute, through Toledo, if you had a Tesla and used their network, it's fairly easy to do. Other vehicles, not so much at this point. I was one of the actually 2 points. So outside, you have to kind of go outside of Toledo to find some of the faster chargers, and not too far out. If you get too far out, there's nothing there. And then I was really surprised. One city that really surprised me was Fort Wayne, Indiana. Fort Wayne, Indiana is a good sized city. It's not 30 or 40,000 people. It's a city. And there was nothing as far as a level 3 charger anywhere near the main highway there. So going from there, really, we had to charge up before that. And another thing that was interesting, a little different in the US versus here in Canada, the level 3 chargers were not what I would call true level 3. Both at GM and at Harley Davidson. The chargers that were in use with my vehicle were 24 kilowatt chargers, which is really unique. So here, a level 2, like in my garage, is going at about 7. So you're timesing that by about 3 at the Harley. But then, if you get to a true level 3, you're going 78, 70. You're charging at those types of speeds. Or at an Electrify America, you're going at those speeds. But there was nothing like that in and around Fort Wayne. It wasn't until I really got into Indianapolis, kind of the outskirts of Indianapolis, where there were a number of level 3 chargers. And again, between Indianapolis and Terre Haute, there is really nothing. There's a couple level 2 chargers here and there, but there's no level 3s without, going far off your path to get to a level 3.
And I'll make a point tying into a conversation that we can start, but the vehicle tech, and we've talked about this a couple of times on the podcast, the vehicle tech improvements, you're seeing the newer vehicles can accept higher rates of charge. I mean, mine and Jesse's truck will accept up to 170. It's the fastest I've really ever seen delivered. But you'll see on these 350 kilowatt Electrify America or other competition stations, you're seeing some vehicles like the Rivian and things go up above 200, but it's not forever. But the battery tech, you're getting these large batteries that can charge quick, but it does play a factor. The big long-standing question is, how fast can you charge without causing massive degradation to the battery? Because you see the rapid charging to 80, and they try to slow it down to help protect the lifetime of the battery. But you have actually written a long dissertation on battery degradation. So curious to see your thoughts in general about the charging experience and battery degradation over the lifetime of the use case of an EV.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I investigated. So your point about speed, it's very true. So what I found in I guess let's break it up into two sections really. So smaller batteries that are under 40 kilowatt, and then we go above that. So if we take a 40 kilowatt battery, so like a 2018 Leaf, for example, and we continually put that on our level 3 high-speed chargers, even with, getting around 50, a speed of 50 when we're charging it, they degrade, quite fast. They are some of my calculations on my own vehicle, and I had a whole bunch of other vehicles again from different years, but matching them up, you're looking at around a 0.025% degradation each and every time you put it on a fast charger for, you're talking for, more than 15 minutes. Okay. So to put any type of smaller vehicle on a fast charger multiple times, continually doing it, that is really going to degrade your battery fast. And one of the things which is great about the Teslas, and I've driven many Teslas, one of the great things about Teslas, there was never really any smaller batteries that they produce. They've always produced large scale batteries. And one of the things that I've found anyways is that the size is one of the issue, or I should say not the issue, but it's one of the variables that's really important to the degradation of the battery overall. So when I say a base model Tesla, a few years old, let's say it was a 50 kilowatt battery, they still degrade at a fairly slow rate compared to something like a 2018 Nissan Leaf, for example. And so one of the reasons is the size. Okay. They do manufacture the batteries slightly different for the Teslas versus the Leafs. But really, even if you look at something like a Kia Soul with a 64 kilowatt battery, they degrade very slowly. And that was one of the reasons I went to the Kona, because the degradation is quite slow on them. Again, one of the big factors is size. So that's important.
The size as far as going,
so the actual type of charging, yes, it does matter though too.
So question, just to go back to that first point, you were saying that it was 0.025 per high-speed charge on the smaller battery pack.
Yeah.
What efficiency difference if you're using an at-home slow charge? How much better is that for the life of the battery for the slower charging?
Yeah, a lot better. Yeah. It's not, I always look at it as it's kind of like a shock to the system when you're putting in these high speed chargers. Even if you're going 40 to 50 to charging them, it's still a big shock versus your home charger at 6 or 7. So it is it's a big improvement in the health of the battery if you always use a level 2 charger at home. Yeah. Now, a level 1 charger also very similar to a level 2. However, one of the things with the level 2 or level 1 charger, sometimes they've found, some other researchers have found that if they continually do it, and there is a little bit of a heat created, a little bit extra heat, created through the level 1 because it has to be on for so long.
Yeah.
Versus a level 2 or a level 3. So they're not always the best either. Still a better option than level 3, obviously, over time. But level 2 is kind of where you want to be.
Spot. Yeah.
Yeah,
and I mean,
is.
honestly, level 2 is a very reasonable thing for most people to have. It doesn't take significant electrical infrastructure. And for a 7 or 8 kilowatt charge, all you really need is a base, circuit in your breaker box.
Yep.
Me and Jesse have the Ford Pro charger. And so I have a 100 amp breaker wired into my house, and it will deliver 16 to 18 an hour, but our battery packs are 130. So, I mean, it's still time wise, still takes, 6 hours to go from 0 to 100, but that's something that, that's very easy and very minimal extra to have that level of charging. And if it protects the life of the battery, something we've also discussed is logistically, most people and most use cases for EVs are regional mobility. So going to work and back and then charging with your level 2, going to the grocery store and to pick up the kids and back, charge at home. And so the lifetime of those batteries can be protected. But there are those individuals like us that have to take a lot more road trips and use the level 3 chargers. And so that's where, it's about protecting the life of the battery the best that you can.
Yeah. So basically, so I get the math correct. If you have a smaller battery, for example, like a Leaf size or something of that size, so you would have, say, throughout the year, you would have 40 charges that would be on a quick charger. So what you're saying is each time you do that, the degradation could potentially be 1 full % of that year of total battery capacity would be lost for those 40 charges on that smaller battery.
Yeah, those numbers sound very close to what I was getting. However, I mean, I did a lot more than 40. I was doing. I had the Leaf when I bought it. It was my primary vehicle, my only vehicle at that point. So I had nothing else. So in the winter, going up to my father's, which is around 45, 50 minutes north of Toronto, I would have to stop in usually one place right in the middle, which it's about an hour and 45-minute drive. So I would do it once in the middle, and then I would do a level 1 at his home, just plug it in if I was going to be there for 6 or 8 hours. And then coming home, I would hit the same place again, quick charge. See, there's 2 quick charges just one day, and that's just, one trip.
Just that trip.
So to do 40 in a year was nothing. I would do much, much higher. I was looking at around, I think if I remember my numbers, around 6% per year.
Over year. Wow.
Yeah, going down that fast. And I would look at the Teslas, and we're talking about 1%. So that's a big difference. The other ones, like a regular, like a Ford Focus electric, you're talking, about 4.5 for the average person, degradation per year.
So I would say we're about half of that. I'd say we're half of that degradation based on the size of our batteries versus their batteries.
Yeah, because ours are 130 kilowatts. But I mean, it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see the study, though, of the degradation of some of these newer vehicles that are coming online. Like the Cadillac Escalade has a 200 kilowatt battery, and the Hummer EV is like 220.
Yeah, it's up
the Ram truck's going to be a 200, and that's how they get their range of 450 miles. But I'd be curious to see the degradation of that battery because it's so large.
And I bet the chemical composition of the batteries will play a big role in that as well, especially with what elements have a better, I guess it would be, distribution of electrons as they make the chemical reaction between them. So the better quality materials would probably have less of a fall off as you,
which is probably where Tesla's efficiency is coming.
Probably is. It could have
for
also
sure.
Because
I
would say they have some of the best batteries. Yeah,
they're trying all different types of compositions of batteries right now. So that is going to be happening. One thing though, like you mentioned at the very start about, we've got things that are going to go this many miles. Tesla's testing this. One of the things though, they don't, a couple things. First of all, they usually, when they give you those numbers, those are in the lab. Okay. Yep. One of the things I do, which is a little bit different than a lot of researchers and professors. I do all mine out in the real world. So I take vehicles out, drive them from here to Erie, Pennsylvania, or I'll drive it from here to Terre Haute and record all my information. And a lot of those numbers that you're getting, those are for in the lab. So there's an extreme number of variables that affect batteries. Very hard to mimic or mirror what's happening in the real world. So those numbers, I know we may get to them one day, but what's going to happen is in the real world, it's not going to play out as nicely as that. That's for sure. And also, typically, when they may get that, that's great. But as I've shown in my studies and papers and that, the charging is one thing that is very often overlooked as degrading these batteries. And it's just like in any electronics. Over time, I have this old tablet now that's 10 years old, and it was state of the art 10 years ago, but it's had so many charges, so much work over the years.
Barely turns on now.
It really does. I was going to say that exact thing. It does. It barely turns on.
I'm the same way
now.
though. That's true. I mean, 10 years ago, I could do all this other stuff, and now, I'm wore out. I can't hardly go. So, I've already degraded my battery too much, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So question, in your research, did you do research around how temperature affects the degradation of a battery?
Yes. And there's actually the US government did one too, which was a really well done study. I did include it as some of the background to mine. So one of the things they found, if you look, they did one of all 50 states actually. And some of the findings, it make a lot of sense. So degradation happened fastest in Florida, which makes a lot of sense. Really hot weather all the time, high humidity. Okay, that is going to degrade the battery, especially if you're always putting it up to 100%, leaving it there in that really hot weather down in Florida. And then if comparable, what they were comparing to, for example, the least, Alaska. Again, it makes a lot of sense, right? You got a nice cold environment. You're not, if you even charge it to 100%, it's not harming it as far as over expanding, heating, keeping that heat in there. That
thermodynamics is not affecting any of the chemistry at that point. So
yeah, and that was their findings, was Florida versus Alaska, which it makes a lot of sense for me, which is why I included it. So the battery degradation was fastest in Florida, so which is one of the hottest states. And
does going from cold to hot to cold to hot, does that in and of itself affect the battery, or is it more the heat and being overly hot is
it's
what
the
affects
continual
it the most?
heat? Yeah, it's the continual heat going from hot to cold, like we do here.
Yeah, exactly.
It's it was 90 something many days here in the summer. We had actually it was a little cooler here than usual, but let's go back to last summer. Better example. It was 90s here lots of times, and then in the winter you're getting down in the 20s and the teens, right? And the only big difference there as far as charging is when you go to a fast charger, you're going to have to be on that fast charger longer. And that's not good for the battery to go on that fast charger a longer period of time. Okay. Like I said, it's like a shock to the system, and you're prolonging that shock to the system by doing that. Now, I just want to mention one thing though. Some of the Model 3s that are from Tesla, I don't know if they had it in the original ones, but the current ones do. They actually have a really nice setup. And I've tried to mimic this actually for other vehicles, is that they warm up the battery compartment when they're going to a supercharger. Okay, so they use their the electronic panel inside the Tesla. They'll say, hey, I want to go to a supercharger. So they hit the button, and it's going to take shows the route to the supercharger. It's going to take them to the supercharger. As soon as they've hit that and they're headed into the supercharger, that battery pack is warming up. Okay. So the batteries are going to be warmer, and that means that battery area doesn't have to be as long on the supercharger because it's already heated up in that area. And that's a really good feature of the Tesla, of the Tesla models.
It's preconditioning the battery.
Yeah,
while
preconditioner preheats. Yeah.
I mean, our trucks we can set our trucks to precondition before we leave, but that doesn't really do any. I mean, that's not for the charging. The experience for the charging. That is a very unique feature.
That's for internal, right? You're talking about.
Well, no, the battery will prepare itself on the charger for the drive, and I think it helps extend the range and things. But it's not the same as preconditioning the battery for a charge, which is, I mean, that does make a ton of sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I just released a paper in the American Journal of Vehicle Design, which I was trying to mimic what that does with kind of like a third-party solution. Like I just bound all these things up, and I've tried to put like a heating blanket underneath it and warm up the battery compartment from underneath and try to see if that's going to help it. From what I found, it did help it. Didn't help it as much as I would like, but one of the things that was really nice that I liked about it was that a consistent starting range every day. So if it was 20 degrees or 30 degrees out, I'd be getting still a good solid number. It wouldn't fluctuate much. I have a really good idea of what it was going to be each and every day, which was nice. And
that's probably what you're talking about, Josh, is what he was doing.
Yeah, is the preconditioning. Yep. I mean, you're warming up the battery before you leave, and that way it's on the charger, and you have an expected range better in the colder weather, because obviously, you know, the loss of range in the cold is a factor, especially on a smaller battery pack. I mean, that does significantly affect your experience. So that is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Now we just got to figure out when they're going to have charging stations at Harvey's. So when we go up there, we can have one of the Harvey burgers.
You know what? It's funny you mentioned that because they do. The one I talked about in Perry Sound.
We're taking a road trip.
We've got a road trip.
Yeah. Perry Sound, which is 2 hours north of Toronto. It was one of the first ones at the Harvey's there. Was it Harvey's or McDonald's? It was Harvey's or McDonald's. I'm not sure. But anyways,
we'll say Harvey's. We got McDonald's down here.
Yeah,
so we'll say
that's
Harvey's.
Right. So you can plug into what they call the Ivy Charge network and go in there. And it's nice. Perry Sound has three different companies that have sets of fast chargers there. So it's got a really good redundant system. It's a cottage country system. A lot of people have cottages in that area. It's also really the first stop before you go into the more northern parts of Ontario. So it's a great location to have multiple fast chargers there. And I mean, I got in there. I went to the Petro-Canada network. Had a minor problem starting it, but it was very minor. Probably more my fault than theirs. And I did get it going. And it was nice and fast. Little pricey, but very reliable. If those, I know they've had one of them wasn't always up, but the other one was. And again, if those two were down, you could go to two more different sets that were literally about 5 miles away.
Very cool.
Very close, very close.
Yeah, and I think we saw yesterday there was a new another grant came through that if it's $100 million through the state, that if there are charging stations that are down, that money can be utilized
to revitalize,
create it or put it into a technology that is more reliable. So you don't lose having those chargers out on the network.
Because the charging station, just like very similar to the vehicles and the degradation, the technology and the systems really do matter. And so like the systems that we're installing are liquid cooled. I mean, like there's aspects to the charging station that help with its longevity and performance. There's some stations that we will connect to that will promise a 350 charge and you're only getting 100 out of it because the station and its components aren't prepared for the charge. And so that's something that obviously
or financially they are working with a demand charge and they don't want to go over that demand for the day and keep their price down to have a better profit. So they force the stations to have a certain overall per day amount that they go with. And that way the demand to the power grid is low enough to where they don't get hit with a demand charge on top of it, which could be as high as $10,000 a month just for the demand charge. Because again, it's supply and demand. They can, and we're seeing about 20 cents per kWh is what the cost is just for the power, not even including some of the other aspects, which would be
they charge you 45, but the power company will charge you 20 to 22.
Yeah. So we're trying to get ours to where, if we're utilizing clean energy, or if we're utilizing batteries so we're not getting hit with a peak charge, then at that point we can make it as low as we possibly can. Some places we think we can be in the 6 cents per kWh, which means when you add our profit into it, you may end up under 20 cents total for that quick charge. We also know some people now, most people in the United States that we've charged at here locally are doing by the minute. So you are being charged a certain percentage by the minute. And it's actually came out a little lower that way for the demand on that one. So it just depends on what system you're working on. You would hope that they would do it to where once you hook up to it, if it's power or the time, you would get hit with the lowest amount. And that's what they would go after. But again, we've not had that. It's either been one or the other. So.
Well, we're running a little bit long for the episode. We do want to have you back on at some point in the near future to continue this conversation. It's been very interesting.
It's very interesting. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was worried that the interview would be degradate through the entirety of it. So,
but I think we did less than 5% this conversation.
Oh, there you go. So, okay.
Well, we do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for your insights. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you then, guys.